Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I would like at the outset to pay tribute to those veterans who came to Parliament Square today, those veterans who have sent messages of support, who are watching at home, those veterans who are with us in the gallery. I'd like to pay tribute as well to the Shadow Defence team that has done so much to hold this government to account for the mistakes that it is making. No. We are now entering the final season. We are now entering the season finale of the tragedy that is this government's Troubles Bill. It has been a long season. Despite taking office in July 2024 with a manifesto commitment to repeal and replace the Legacy Act, it took 15 months to bring this bill to the House. And despite having second reading in November, nearly 6 months ago, the legislation has gone nowhere. Correct. And despite bringing forward its remedial order to strike down parts of the Legacy Act in January, the government has failed since to bring it to the Lords, because it knows that the Lords do not support it. Correct. So the Troubles Bill is stuck in a legislative purgatory, doomed for a certain time to walk the night till its foul crimes are burnt away. The reason for this is an open secret in Westminster. The truth is, it is trapped between the Northern Ireland Office and the Ministry of Defence and Number 10, with the Prime Minister and his team unable and unwilling to make a decision about what the outcome will be. And we have read this script before, Madam Deputy Speaker. Now, the Northern Ireland Office, for its part, is simply carrying out the orders of the Prime Minister when he became Prime Minister, the instruction that was in the Labour manifesto, and they are carrying out the orders of Lord Hermer, the Attorney General.
Don't we know it?
About whom, it must be said, some extremely serious allegations have been made in recent days, not least that he may have drafted or approved documents alleging serious crimes by soldiers without reasonably credible evidence, and that he continued pushing settlements after being told that his clients were lying.
For money.
And the Ministry of Defence is all too aware of the open hostility that is held towards this legislation by members of the armed forces, present and past, is all too aware of the dangers it presents to morale and retention and perhaps even recruitment, but its ministers are not always prepared to say what needs to be said in order to get their way. I'll give way now.
Thank him for giving way, Madam Deputy Speaker. The reason why we are having this debate is because the military forces that were deployed in Northern Ireland weren't provided with adequate protection to protect them in hindsight. And if the honourable gentleman genuinely cared about veterans and cared about the protections to those members of the forces in the future, he would have submitted amendments to the Armed Forces Bill to prevent reoccurrence. So, can he make us aware of any such amendments to the future bill?
Can I very gently remind members that interventions should be short and to the point? Shadow Minister.
I very strongly encourage the honourable gentleman to take some time to read the amendment paper to the Armed Forces Bill. Two gentlemen sitting either side of me have tabled very many amendments, and I encourage him to go out this evening and try and find one veterans organisation that supports what his party is trying to do with this bill. I give way.
Grateful for the Shadow Secretary of State for giving way, and of course he is the Shadow Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, so he should know the lay of the land in Northern Ireland. He's talked a lot in his speech so far about veterans. Has he read the letter from Sandra Peake, the director of the Wave Trauma Centre? Unimpeachable character, someone who stood on behalf of victims, of all kinds of victims. She is imploring us tonight to put this bill through so we can properly scrutinise it. Has he read that letter? Is he going to mention victims at all in this speech?
I say to the honourable gentleman, I have read that letter and I have a great deal of respect for the Wave Trust. I did some work with the Wave Trust when I first came into this House, and I respectfully disagree with what is in that letter for reasons I will set out in due course. I will give way.
Does the Shadow Minister agree with me that any member of the benches opposite, including ministers who want to be taken seriously by armed forces personnel, needs to condemn the remarks of Lord Hermer and their disgraceful disparaging of our armed forces personnel?
Quite right. My honourable friend is absolutely right, and there will be ample opportunity for them to do so tonight. Tonight, the government has a choice. Labour backbenchers have a choice, and the choice is simple. It is to reject this controversial and unloved legislation which promises much but would do no good. I'll happily give way to that the honourable member.
It appears to me that the only two organisations that agree with immunity for prosecution are the terrorists and the Conservative Party.
What are you talking about? You don't know what you're talking about.
Shadow Secretary.
We'll get to this point in a moment about immunity, because I think the Labour Party needs to look deep down within its soul and its history before it says such things. This bill will reopen the door to vexatious litigation. It will drag old soldiers through the courts and subject split-second decisions taken under high stress decades ago to the post hoc algorithm of a legal framework that did not exist at the time. And the honourable gentleman said that they weren't given adequate protections at the time. What has happened subsequently is that the legal framework has changed beneath their feet and held them accountable in a way that could never have been intended at the time. And they ought... I'll happily give way.
What is the Minister more surprised by? That the promised amendments leaked to the papers at the weekend are missing from this debate tonight, or that the Armed Forces Minister is missing from the chamber tonight and won't be here to vote for this disgraceful carryover motion because he knows it shouldn't be voted for?
I'm sad to say to my right honourable friend that I am not surprised by either of those things. I am not surprised that the government is living on vague promises to bring forward amendments, despite the fact that it has had 6 months to bring forward those amendments. And I am sorry to say that I am not surprised that certain members of the front bench have chosen to absent themselves whilst expecting the backbench of the Labour Party to turn up and go through the lobbies without them. Honourable gentlemen opposite have mentioned victims. I will happily give way to my honourable friend.
The member refers to the absence of the publication of any amendments by the Secretary of State, promised but not delivered. Might that be because this Secretary of State, who's embarrassingly shown himself to be wholly beholden to the Dublin government, hasn't yet got their approval for these amendments? Might that be the truth of the matter?
I fear that the honourable and learned gentleman is right. We saw this morning that Sinn Féin have spoken out in opposition to the very idea of amendments, so we wonder how it will be possible for the right honourable gentleman, Secretary of State, to bring forward amendments without the agreement of Dublin, without the agreement of Sinn Féin, without the whole framework that he has built collapsing beneath him. Now, the bill promises victims the earth. It raises their hopes, but I am afraid, in practice, it will offer nothing in the way of conclusion or finality, because although there will be court cases and there will be inquests and there will be trials and reviews and challenges, as the Secretary himself has said, the prospect of conviction now is vanishingly small. The number of answers that victims will get will be minimal, and all the while veterans will be hauled before the courts, investigated for years, subjected to all the pain and ignominy that that will bring. The process has become the punishment. And that is why none of the amendments that the government is speculating to the press about laying down will do anything to solve the problem that is before us. And on this side of the House, we have long argued that a different approach is necessary, one that draws a line under the conflict, one that draws a line under the legal conflict that has subsequently followed, one that builds a new system that builds on the strengths of the peace process as it was defined in 1998. In 1998, it was understood that you could have immunity in return for information. It underpins the legislation that was brought forward in order to support the peace process. That is why we have legislation on the destruction of weapons. It enables forensic information to be destroyed. It is why we have legislation that enables people... I will give way to the honourable lady in a moment. It is why we have legislation which enables people to come forward and reveal where bodies are buried without fear of prosecution. This is immunity. It is why we had letters of comfort and royal pardons of mercy. It was understood that immunity would be an essential part of the peace process for everyone who was not a veteran. I give way to the right honourable lady.
I thank the Shadow Minister for giving way. However, Madam Deputy Speaker, this faux outrage was never, when my committee actually, Madam Deputy Speaker, my committee has done some excellent work on this very, very sensitive matter. And when we were in Westminster Hall, Madam Deputy Speaker, there was no faux outrage. These people didn't turn up to speak up for the veterans that they speak of now. The Secretary of State is doing an excellent job, so is my committee, and I find it very, very wrong that this is being presented in this way, in this House, on the floor of this House. We need a carry-over motion. We need to be in a better place where there then will be amendments. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Well, I do genuinely respect the honourable lady and the work her committee does, and she will remember that I was at that Westminster Hall debate, and I must respectfully say my outrage is not faux. I feel this very deeply. I've spent a lot of time talking to the people who are affected by this, and I'm sorry, I'm going to make some progress. And so, when the peace process was going through, when Labour was in power, I had no problem with creating immunity. I had no problem at all. And in 2005, as the Secretary of State will remember, because he was in the Cabinet at the time, Peter Hain, the then Secretary of State, brought forward a bill that would have given immunity to terrorists and terrorists alone. And it was only removed when, under pressure from the Conservative Party, the government agreed to introduce immunity for veterans, and Sinn Féin pulled its support, and so the government pulled the bill. Immunity is one of the things on which the peace process was founded, and yet now in government the Labour Party have forgotten all about this and said it can't possibly apply to anyone again. So the Labour Party has said that it can't support immunity, and yet it used to. Similarly, the government has said that it can't support our legislation on the grounds that there was no support for it in Northern Ireland. But I'm afraid by that criteria this legislation has also failed. Because where is the support in Northern Ireland? It is not up there. It is not in the streets of Belfast. This is an unloved bill. Yeah. There are lots of people who appreciate that this is the wrong way of going about things. I will give way one more time.
Minister, for giving way. One of the things that greatly concerns me is that this carryover motion has been pressed by the Irish Government, and it absolutely boggles my mind. The double standard is entirely shocking. The Irish Government needs to be held to account for its role in protecting IRA murders across the border. We think of all those ones who were murdered. Kenneth Smith, my cousin, Daniel McCormick, his comrade, Alexei Cummins, Stuart Montgomery, just four of those, many, many more. Whenever they were murdered, they raced across the border. Does he share my anger on behalf of my constituents and my family, who want to know why the Irish Government have more say than the victims of Northern Ireland, my family and others?
My honourable friend always speaks incredibly powerfully on this point. The government has also argued that the bill, our bill, was found to be incompatible with human rights legislation. But that is only partially true. The truth is that the government failed to challenge the findings in the courts. And those findings themselves were highly questionable, and there is very high-level, highly credible legal advice, legal arguments that show that the Legacy Act may well have not been incompatible, precisely because the same logic around immunity had been used in 1998. So unless we are prepared to say that potentially the legislation passed during the peace process is itself incompatible with human rights law, then the argument on the Legacy Act itself falls. And this is what is being considered in the case of Dillon before the Supreme Court now. So the government cannot argue that it was incompatible with human rights because it failed to see the process to its conclusion. All of this, it must be said, has been made clearer and clearer over the lifetime of this law's delay. In the time that it has taken the bill to get only through its second reading, we have seen starkly and painfully regular real-life examples of the problems it will perpetuate. I will give a few small examples. In February, this House debated the terrible ruling in the Clono case. This was the case, Madam Deputy Speaker, from February 1992, when 4 men, known terrorists, armed with semi-automatic weapons and a Dushka machine gun capable of firing 600 rounds a minute at a range of 1,100 yards, attacked a Royal Ulster Constabulary police office, police station and were in transit to commit further crimes. They were confronted by members of the armed forces who killed them. Now, these terrorists called themselves an army, carried weapons of war, sought to kill and operated entirely outside of the bounds of any law. Yet we were asked to believe that the use of lethal force against them was not justified. I'm afraid then that case is now being challenged, and those men are subject to unjust and unfair scrutiny of decisions they made in a split second decades ago. There is nothing in the amendments that the Secretary of State has discussed with the press that will do anything about this.
Which amendments?
In November, we debated the findings in the case against Soldier F from Bloody Sunday. He was found not guilty after the longest and most intricate inquiry in British legal history. Indeed, Judge Patrick Lynch told Belfast Crown Court that the evidence, even then, fell well short of the standard required. He said, "A 53-year-old statement cannot be cross-examined, nor can I assess the demeanour of an A4 piece of paper." The House must see, again, that it is becoming vanishingly difficult to get convictions, because the 1998 agreement was 27 years ago. The ceasefire began 31 years ago. There is nothing in the Secretary of State's proposed amendments or in this bill that will do anything to right that situation. Several times, the case of Soldier B, a former SAS officer, has been raised in the Commons. In October, the case was thrown out by a court in Belfast, where the judge described it as ludicrous and said it should never have come to his court. But not before the man in question had been investigated for 4 years. And then a further challenge was mounted, despite the judge having said it was ludicrous. And only recently has the veteran in question been freed from the weight of that. There is, I'm afraid, if the government's bill goes ahead, we will see a return to this repeat investigation of innocent men who will be dragged through the courts, and then, at the end, the legal cavalcade will move on, leaving them having borne the emotional burden of being investigated for having done nothing wrong. And there is nothing that has been speculated about in the press this weekend that will do anything to right that wrong. I will give way.
My honourable friend is articulating it perfectly. Does he agree that the principle of innocent until proven guilty is no comfort at all for these people who are subjected to years of gruelling inquiry just to establish what we already know, they are innocent?
My honourable friend is quite right. The process has become the punishment. The process is being used to continue the conflict by other means. I will give way.
Would you accept that whether the process at the end exonerates the soldiers and the veterans, the whole point of the process and the whole point of taking them to court in the first place is to give the daily headlines in the paper to allow Sinn Féin and the IRA to rewrite the history of the Troubles.
The whole point.
I'm afraid I must agree with the honourable gentleman that this is clearly what vexatious litigation looks like. This is vexatious litigation moved against men who did nothing wrong but are now confronted with a legal framework which creates endless potential for challenge against them. I will give way one more time.
Has he I wonder, has the Shadow Secretary of State read the Savile report? He referenced the Savile report, Savile inquiry, not that long ago. Has he read what it says about Soldier F? About how many people he killed in that day? Unarmed people, innocent people, marching for civil rights, shot down in cold blood by Soldier F, by his own admission. Has he read that?
Have you read Phil Shiner's testimony?
I have read the Savile inquiry, and he will have just heard me say that even after the longest, one of the longest, most expensive, most detailed public inquiries in British legal history, it was impossible to get a conviction. And yet we are asking victims in Northern Ireland to believe, that there will be some magical moment where suddenly it will be possible to get convictions in other cases. This, the House must understand, is for the birds. It will not happen. Victims will have their hopes raised and dashed in front of this legislation. I will give way.
The honourable member agree with me that if ever there was a demonstration of the two-tier process in terms of legacy, we have it as a result of the Savile report because the same Savile report that was used to pursue Soldier F contained an assertion that Martin McGuinness probably had a submachine gun on the same day. He was never questioned, never mind pursued or taken to court, not once.
Well, the honourable gentleman indeed raises a very significant issue about the terrible events of Bloody Sunday. But I will not attempt to relitigate the whole of the Savile inquiry this evening. But I understand the remarks that both gentlemen have made. In the same, similarly, over the course of the past few months, we have seen veterans, very senior veterans, senior generals and former members of the Special Forces come out decisively against this bill. On Armistice Day, 9 four-star generals in an unprecedented intervention wrote warning that highly trained members of Special Forces are already leaving the service. In January, 7 SAS commanders wrote of the acute dangers of how a peacetime human rights framework now wields an effective veto over efforts to close the past. And last month, Generals Wall and Parker wrote, "Those who did their duty in circumstances not of their own making are left exposed, with the shield of context or accountability that should rightfully belong to the state." And now we read this month too, Madam Deputy Speaker, public reports that members of the Special Forces are quitting because they sense that the lawyers of the future will come after them. So I implore the House, on moral grounds, practical grounds, political grounds, do not support this bill. And I know that Labour members will not wish to take it from me. They don't have to, but they should take it from the generals and the Special Forces veterans who've dedicated so much of their lives to protecting their country and who do not want to see their comrades in arms persecuted, do not want to see their country weakened and put at risk. As politicians, I would draw their attention to the fact that this bill is not beloved by members of their constituencies. And they are being sent through the lobbies tonight by people who may well change their position tomorrow. The failings of this bill, should it be passed, will be quickly seen, but they will be long felt. The House has the power to stop it tonight, and if it does not, if the government persists, the next Conservative administration will repeal it. And once again draw a line under the Troubles.